All right, everybody, find your chairs. Find your chairs.
Thank you, Mark, for being the storm voice. Appreciate it. That is not my repertoire. So if everyone please make your way back to your seats, I would appreciate it. So before we turn over to our next speaker, who's going to talk about stacking capital and how things work, I did want to talk to you about the State of New Mexico Economic Development Department and kind of the people around the room. I'm sure a lot of you have actually worked with members of our team or have interacted with them on a regular basis. But just so you guys can understand and kind of start commingling, we have members of our marketing team here with Bruce, Lauren, and Beth Davis. And they're mingled throughout. Lauren, would you please raise your hand? Stand up, thank you. And then we have Bruce in the back as well. So if you have ideas on how to market this or need to bounce ideas off of somebody, those are 3 very good resources. We also have on staff members of our finance team. I know everyone knows Joanna, she's the one who's really been instrumental in putting this on, but the team lead is in the back, Juan Torres. If Juan, you would please raise your hand. We have Joel as well sitting in the front. So members of the business community, if you're looking at financial incentives or ways in which your business may need collateral, the finance development team has a litany of programs to offer you. One other thing that I believe is one of the most important aspects of our group, and so the business community, and I'm 99% sure the municipality community should know who our region reps are. They are also in the room. You have Susie. Susie would stand up. She is covering the southeast portion of New Mexico. There's a group. You have Christine Logan. She's covering the Las Cruces area, so the southwest portion of the state. You have Fred Shepard here, covering the northwest part of the state. Tim Hageman, standing in the back with his hand up. He's covering the northeast and is also the tribal liaison for the state. We have Peter Mitchell, who covers the north central portion of the state. And then Mark Roper, who is the jack of all trades of the department right now. He's standing in the back. He is our division director, as well as the regional rep for the Albuquerque area. So, one of the things that our department does is working through the region reps is helping not only learn your business, learn the community that the business operates in, but starts the process of identifying grants, programs, or technical assistance that our department offers. And I'm sure you've all heard this, but I cannot stress it enough that these regional reps and the finance development team and the marketing individuals that I just introduced are wonderful resources that you should definitely connect with. If anything, they're able to play kind of the USB cord to other federal agencies. They know what's going on in your communities. They work on the legislative priorities that take place in your areas. So they are a really, really good resource. They can also connect you to individuals like myself in the department who may be able to help with a deeper dive into an economic forecast for your area. So please work through your region reps, commingle. So what we're taking place, or kind of what's taking place in kind of the introduction prior to Terry's actual introduction, is how we are going to stack that capital. And so the region reps obviously have those ways to do it in terms of using the state grants. But there's also another member of our team here who I believe is going to play a real instrumental part towards the rural communities, and that's Daniel Gutierrez. He's the head of the Main Street District in our department. Daniel, can you stand up? There's Daniel. So as you heard from the American Institute, there's a lot of money that's going to be flowing into communities, and it's going to come in waves and in phases, and there's going to be different technicalities that take place. So you'll see business investment, you'll see community revitalization, and that may be one of the most important pieces, especially for the municipalities here, is how you're reinvesting into your community, revitalizing it. And so the Main Street Director is another wonderful resource for you guys to really tap into to see what's available for you and what is out there. We have federal partners here as well. We have members of the COGS. And so I'm trying to lay a groundwork for what, kind of what's building. It is kind of this storied process that we're working here. So again, thank you all for being here. Truly appreciate it. Oh, perfect. I forgot one more, and I apologize. She's going to kick me when I leave. The businesses that are here. There's an individual of our team. She runs the Office of Science and Technology. Her name is Mariah. Mariah, could you please stand up and wave your hand? She's sitting down and waving her hand. She's in the back right there. Thank you. Mariah runs the Office of Science and Technology. So for the businesses here, if you're in that science and tech field, or you're in the startup phases and you're looking for grant opportunities or ways to kind of move your business from phase 0 to phase 1, she is a great resource to kind of connect. So I'm really trying to hold back before we continue on, but we're really trying to lay a groundwork to make funding and to get projects off the ground and up and running in your communities and for your businesses. So please, again, take time to meet the people you're with, start those connections, start that networking, because that's how this projects are really going to take off. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. Okay, I am really excited to announce our next presenter, and that is Terry Bruner. And Terry Bruner is the CEO of the Grants Collective and the co-founder of Grow New Mexico. Terry's work revolves around bringing more financial resources to impactful New Mexico projects. Terry spent 7 years as President Obama's appointee to the position of the USDA New Mexico State Director for Rural Development. During that time, he managed investments of more than $1 billion in housing, small business, renewable energy, and utilities in rural areas throughout New Mexico. So I know in our department we work really closely with Terry, and did in the past with USDA work, and now in his current role with Grow New Mexico. So we're really excited to have him speak. So Terry?
All right, thank you very much. Before they get the slides up here, I was thinking of today's presentation in a clever way to put it, but essentially I was going to say something like how to get in the zone, or something like that, but I just left it be. There's too many problems we're having today with synonyms. There's no synonyms for opportunity. There could be hope zones or occasion zones, but those aren't adequate enough. But so today we're going to talk a little bit about leveraging money behind your opportunity zones. But before I talk about the alphabet soup of what goes on around funding, we're going to talk a little bit about what communities can do to prepare their zones. So first, I wanted to mention a little story for you about 2008, 2009, when the stimulus program came out. And those of us that were serving in the Obama administration were really excited about that program, because the economy was in desperate need of recovery, and it made accessible to communities lots of different federal funding sources, and a lot of them were grant sources. We had taken loans and put them into grants instead. And we just had so much money available. It was terrific. But when the money was released, New Mexico did a poor job of showing up at the table and bringing those funds into the state. We just weren't ready. We didn't have, the term shovel ready. We didn't have shovel ready projects that were available. So when the money was there, when we had the checkbook and we were ready to write checks, we couldn't write them. And for a state that has the great needs that we have, that's an unfortunate situation for us to not belly up to the bar and be present when these opportunities come along. And unfortunately, that trend continues. My work at Grow New Mexico and the Grants Collective surrounds getting more resources to the state. In any given year, New Mexico gets less than 1% of HUD funding. Less than 1%. One year we got 0.08% of the funding available from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And those aren't just urban funds. Those are funds for remediation of lead-based paint in tribal areas, for affordable housing, for all sorts of things that we do here in New Mexico. We just don't apply. The same is true in foundation funding. We get a quarter of the foundation funding that Arizona gets. We get 1/10 of what Colorado gets. And very often when we do our work, we're out talking to foundations who don't know anything about us. They don't know we have the challenges we have. We're not out making the case that we need to make to, again, get in the game and be a part of the conversation around funding worthwhile projects around the state. There's a misperception when I talk about federal funding that often takes place in the state. People talk about, New Mexico gets more back for its tax dollar in federal funding than any other state. That's mainly because the payments we're getting that are automatic through programs like food stamps or various assistance programs. But when it comes to programs through USDA and HUD and other federal agencies, we just don't compete at the same level of other states, and we have to do a better job. And that's why we do the work that we do at Grow New Mexico and the Grants Collective. Now, our mission is to try to get more money into the state. So we work on what we call capacity building. We try to give you the tools that you need to get in the game and to put together a successful project. That might mean getting a grant writer, or doing some financial analysis, or getting you a really worthwhile meeting with that foundation or that federal funder that you could talk to about your project. So we work on professional development around grant writing and also make information available and provide advisory services. So just last week, to make this all even more confusing, my organization, Grow New Mexico, merged with the Grants Collective, and we are now offering 3 different programs. And I'll go through each of those real briefly just so you know what the heck we do over there. So at Grow New Mexico, it's really technical assistance is what we call it. And sussing out your project, what you're trying to get funding for, who knows about that, the information we can give you, anything we can get you to get you over the hurdle, right? Because New Mexico, what I've found over the last a decade or so working on projects, we are a land of fantastic ideas. We have great ideas, but our execution is often missing. And if you want to have a side conversation, I can talk to you about hemp, all right? And just about every hemp scheme I've heard in the last 10 years, but how many of those hemp producers are actually going to manufacture that product, ship it, et cetera, et cetera? So we need more help on the execution, and that's what we try to do. On our cooperative network, which is part of the Grants Collective, we have an online subscription service that provides grant opportunity notices. So every week we publish twice, between about 5 and 20 foundation, federal, state grant notices that are out there. Sometimes they might be loan notices as well, but opportunities that you may seek for your community or for your program. We also provide on this platform an opportunity to connect with other people doing project and grant writing work, so you can ask questions and say, hey, has anybody ever written a proposal to the such and such foundation? Can you give me some tips? Can you tell me how to file this federal form properly? We provide a platform to do that. And then we offer up tips. We write blog posts and suggestions about how best to engage a federal agency, or how to, write that knockout killer narrative as part of your proposal. So we do some of that as well. And then finally, we have a Talent Academy grant writer training program. Every year, we train between 12 and 24 grant writers through a 4-month program. It costs approximately $4,000 per grant writer. And this is not the program where you go to the convention center on the weekend for 6 hours and hear about how to write a grant. This is your labor-intensive, everybody's in a room hacking it out, understanding the grant writing process from top to bottom. How to do your financials, how to do your narrative, how to talk to the funders, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we offer this program as well. We just started with our new cohort. A lot of Albuquerque nonprofits and some public entities send their folks through this. We have an exciting new program with the New Mexico Association of Counties, where we're working with county governments in 12 counties to train a grant writer in each county. We are also working in Eddy County, New Mexico. We're going to hopefully have an agreement by the end of this month to go into Eddy County and provide these services for projects down in southeast New Mexico. We have put together as well a 3-day training program for people that already write grants to give them some extra technical expertise. So that's what we do at the Grants Collective in Grow, New Mexico. So I'm going to go through this presentation and talk a lot about community development type stuff, but also spend some time on funding. So first and foremost, the zones that we have here in New Mexico, the opportunity zones, aren't going to change. That's one of the questions we get so much is, next year the zone's going to change. Can I get my, property out in Grants, New Mexico qualified if it's not in the zone? No, the zones you have are the zones you get. As we used to tell my kids, you get what you get and you don't get upset. So that's what you got, opportunity zones across the state. And the first priority amongst these is to identify your zone's needs and stakeholders. So, you should be looking at each of your properties and understanding what utilities are there. What are the attributes of the location? What are the existing businesses? Who are the nearby institutions? Do you have community colleges? Do you have rural electric co-ops? Do you have other institutions that may have an interest in that zone? So identifying your zone and then identifying your community needs is important. What are your priorities as a community in that zone? Is it healthcare? Is it multifamily housing? Manufacturing, transportation, logistics, hotels? How many jobs do those create? What are the skills and labor needed? Those are the things you should be thinking about for each of your zone. And throughout this presentation, I'm going to give a few shout outs to people that can help in regard to looking at your community needs. Mark Lautman is here from CE Lab. I think Mark's still here somewhere, can wave his hand. Mark's organization does those types of assessments to look at, the skill set you have in that area, the opportunity there for job creation, the type of industries you can attract. So that's another essential part. And then matching your needs in your community to that zone are important. Can you attract what you're looking at? I have a lot of conversations with people about opportunity zones, and some people think that suddenly they're going to get a call one day and a guy's going to say, I want to put this manufacturing plant in your zone tomorrow. That doesn't happen. All this is going to happen through a lot of hard work and effort and community building and working together and that type of thing. It's not just going to happen by happenstance. And you have to keep in mind you're competing with all the zones across the country to try to get attention and to show that you have the right attributes to attract investment. Knowing your stakeholders in your community is important, and those who might have an interest in your zone. Is it commercial realtors, developers? Who needs to be at the table? Do you have local individuals who have money to invest that might want to put it behind a fund to invest in that zone? Who's your government leadership, your business leadership, your major institutions in the area? Those are people that need to be a part of this discussion that you're having about your opportunity zones. Investors want to know that the community is all in on this. They don't want to invest in a random thing happening that one guy organized somewhere out in rural New Mexico. They need to see that there is a community-wide investment. You know that because you wouldn't put your money behind something where there's not some consensus around it, correct? So an example of that is something that's been done for years out in Clovis with the Committee of 50 to save the Air Force Base. They have an advocacy group that is dedicated just to advocating for that base, and it works. They have a variety of local businesses and government leaders, healthcare professionals that take a part in that group to make sure they are not forgotten, but also to talk about the positive attributes of that base of the community. So those are the people that need to be at the table, and you need to hold a stakeholder meeting about your zone. Get everybody together. Figure out what they want to do and what they're interested in and where there is capacity and ability to pursue this type of opportunity. You need to have people on the same page presenting a unified front, right? You don't want to have folks planning to invest in healthcare in your community in an opportunity zone and then have a whole group of people who say, no, we don't want to do that. We want to invest in affordable housing. No, you want to be, mission-driven as a group, all working together. It's a competition. You're trying to show off your zone and show people that's worthwhile for investment. You need to inventory your existing plans in your area and create your plan. Good news, much of this has been done. So Michael Patrick is here from NMSU. He helped create Stronger Economies Together plans for every region of the state that discuss the economic opportunities in various regions. You have the councils of governments that are required to put together a community and economic development strategy for the US government. Those are intricate plans that talk again about where they've already done the assessment of what type of jobs you can attract to your region. You have counties that have done plans and municipalities. So a lot of that work has been done in some way, shape, or form, and you can reference that in advocating for your zone and planning for that zone. Selecting a lead for your zone is important. Who is it going to be that gets everybody organized? Is it the chamber? Is it the city? Is it the local economic development association? Who is the one that is going to drive this effort, right? You don't want to have all the cooks in the kitchen or too many cooks in the kitchen. You want to have somebody that's going to be the head honcho, the lead for this type of work. You want to show you're organized and you got it together, that type of thing. So understanding the resources that are available to you, this is the bulk of what I'm going to talk about, is the alphabet soup and the myriad resources that exist out there for different types of programs. So when you're looking at your zone, you should think about what enhancements can be made to that zone. You know, you think about the things that are in the ground, above the ground, if it's the electric lines, the sidewalks, the water, the sewer, and then also what a project might need. What incentives would a business need to locate there? What enhancements and enticements need to be made? So, we'll go to local resources here first. At the local level, just to think about this a little bit, you've got lots of resources available that can help with your opportunity zone. Planning and zoning. What's the planning and zoning situation in your community? Can a project get through planning and zoning in a reasonable time? Are there opportunities for express permitting for opportunity zones? Can you go to your county commission or your local municipality and say, hey, we got this great opportunity here, and we want you to set up an express permitting operation for them? Local governments have authority over roads, water, and sewer. What is it looking like for that opportunity zone? What are they planning? Are they extending water and sewer out to that site south of Tucumcari or not? Getting that information is important. And then also think about your other institutions. Educational institutions like community colleges have a lot of interest in opportunity zones, can provide job training incentives, can put together programs around workforce development in that area. You should also be looking at industrial revenue bonds and the possibility that those could come into assistance. TIDs and PIDs, tax increment development districts and public improvement districts, are both in New Mexico state law and can be employed for this type of project. And frankly, TIDs and PIDs fit geographically really well with opportunity zones. And I'll just say that Deb Inman and Beth Waldrop are here from Albuquerque Economic Development. If they can wave their hands, they maybe, yeah, thank you. They know all about these incentives, and they are a great resource on that. You also have Local Economic Development Act funding, which can provide incentives for that local business recruitment. And the State Economic Development Department has authority over that. So there's lots of local resources. And I wanted to mention that during these talks, I throw out all these ideas and they sound great, and people come up and they say, yeah, but you know, they don't always work. Well, they aren't always going to work, but you have to try every one of them and see if they fit what you're trying to do. It's not easy, it's hard work, it takes a lot of effort, but some of these may work perfectly with what you're trying to do for your zone. Federal agencies. So before I get into all these different agencies, I wanted to mention something about the federal government. So now is in a sense the perfect time to engage the federal government on opportunity zones. It's the end of the fiscal year, at the end of September, and the federal budget has increased by 4%. The sequester that we passed back in 2011 has ended, so there are no restrictions anymore on what federal agencies can spend. They're not going to get cut further. The deficit limit has been raised, so this president has made it clear he doesn't mind spending money and expanding the deficit. It is a really good time. So I know that in the past, and it's been rocky, and we've had some years where the federal government has no money, we're cutting everything, we're worried about this, we're worried about this. There is a massive government expansion going on right now that you should be aware of. So when somebody tells you, oh, I hear the federal government doesn't have any money anymore, that is not true. And so let me dispel that myth. Whether you agree with that trajectory or not, that is the reality of the situation. So you should not be thinking, oh, all these federal agencies, they don't have any money. They do have money, and it's time to talk to them. So let's go through each of one of these, and I'm going to say a little bit. I don't have the time today to go deep into the heart of each of these, but we'll talk a little bit about them. Economic Development Administration. And before I talk about each of these, most federal agencies have a mandate to work with opportunity zones and are designing programs to give special exemptions, special efforts behind these opportunity zones. And that is the case with Economic Development Administration. At the U.S. Department of Commerce, they provide grants in their Public Works program for infrastructure basically around economic development. So you can extend your water and sewer line out to that site. You could put in some infrastructure that you need to make that site ready. That's the basic way to think of it. It's the public works behind the economic development that needs to happen. So a nonprofit, a public entity can apply for those funds. Typically it's a 1-to-1 match. So on those grant funds, they go up to about 1.2 million or something like that. It just depends. Your local councils of governments know all about this program and can help you and guide you through that process. But let me just tell you something. I worked for the federal government for a while. There aren't any other economic development grant programs. That is it. And if you ain't talking to them, you should be talking to them. That's basically what I would suggest. I'm not saying any idea gets funded, but talk to them and see what they can offer. They have a state representative here for that agency as well, which is great. U.S. Department of Agriculture and Rural Development, that's my old agency, 45 different programs. Believe it or not, as Joanna said in her introduction, USDA Rural Development works on housing. They work on water and sewer and broadband. And they also do food stuff, believe it or not. That's a joke. But they do a lot for rural communities. We used to say they're the only federal agency that can build a rural community from the ground up. And that's very much true. So they provide grants and loans behind water and wastewater. So if your county wants to extend that infrastructure out to that rural opportunity zone, they can help fund that. They also provide housing. So they have more than 112 multifamily housing projects in the state of New Mexico, believe it or not. So they provide incentives around rehab for multifamily housing projects, which could be an investment opportunity. As well, they provide a lot of help around businesses. So they have a very active loan guarantee program where they will guarantee a lender's loan up to 90% of the value and up to $10 million. So if you are moving that manufacturing plant and they've got a loan from Wells Fargo Bank or a conventional lender, and that lender is not too sure about doing that deal, USDA can guarantee up to 90% of the value of that loan, taking that risk away from the lender. It's a good deal. They also have a fantastic broadband program. Unfortunately, they've just closed out a $600 million program that had grants, loans, and loan guarantees available. But USDA is somebody you should be talking to about broadband. And I'll just mention that when we talk about rural, I know that folks from Santa Rosa may not think they're rural, or you're from Belen and you don't think you're rural, but believe it or not, you are rural. I hate to break it to you. You're rural if you're outside of Albuquerque, Santa Fe, Las Cruces, and Rio Rancho, basically, is when the rural designations start. So, so talk to USDA Rural Development about your zone. Housing and urban development. They have a lot of programs around affordable housing. So housing development is a popular opportunity zone investment, and HUD could be a part of that. They've got their Section 8 voucher program. They also have a lot of rehab money, and they also have a lot of social services related type money. And again, New Mexico does not do a lot in this area. They have a fantastic program, a community redevelopment program that is available that provides up to, I believe it is $1 million for a community redevelopment plan, and up to then $40 to $50 million to implement that plan around a HUD related property. So it's kind of like a rehab of a several block area And that's a terrific program. New Mexico has not received one of those yet. But if you are looking at an opportunity zone that's in Albuquerque and it's in need of rehab and it needs parks and it needs sidewalks and streets and affordable housing rehab, they have a program that can do it wholesale, which is really nice. Only a few get it per year, but like I said, New Mexico doesn't have one yet. Department of Treasury that created the Opportunity Zone program has a lot of resources on the data side, but they also sometimes will have some technical assistance funds to teach you how to do stuff, basically. So they'll have grants behind that. Federal Reserve Bank is a little used agency that has terrific data and information, and they're good at community convenings and giving you economic analysis for an area. So, you know, why not have a stakeholder meeting for your county and invite the Federal Reserve to come present and tell you the attributes of the economy in your area? They're great. Department of Health and Human Services is one that has a community economic development program, believe it or not. At the Department of Health and Human Services, they also try to do place-based economic development and have grants behind that type of project. Just yesterday, the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, came out with a Local Foods, Local Places grant that is for opportunity zones. So if you have a local food project, like there's a great project happening in the Old Town area that is a marketplace for produce, and it's got restaurants, things like that. It's like a local foods kind of thing. That would be perfect for the EPA program. But I want to emphasize, you know, when you came to this meeting today, you probably weren't thinking that EPA plays a big role in opportunity zones or Department of Health and Human Services, but they do. So you should be talking to them, especially on Health and Human Services if you're thinking of putting a hospital on that opportunity zone, or a clinic, or a medical devices company, or something like that. Those are all things to be thinking about on the federal agencies. Okay, stateside. I'm not out of the state government, so this is state government as I know it. Let me just also say, as I did with the federal government, it is a fantastic time to do business with the state. And Alicia Keys did not pay me to say that. But it is a great time to be talking to them. Last year, there were 1,600 capital outlay projects, almost up to $1 billion worth. And this year does not look like it's going to be much different. All right? So what that means, you know, I can remember when we didn't have a capital outlay here not too far back. We gave money through the state of New Mexico to 1,600 local projects. How hard is it to be one of those 1,600 for your area, I wonder? And we are starting the session pretty soon. So you should be, I'll jump to the bottom of my list. If you have an opportunity zone and you need public improvements, you should be talking to your state legislator about capital outlay. Just a recommendation to do that tomorrow. But let's go through each of these. You know the Economic Development Department, who have graciously hosted today's event. They have tons of technical expertise, but then they have some incentive programs that you saw earlier: Rural Jobs Tax Credit, the JTIP program, the LEDA program. You should be talking to your Economic Development Department. The Environment Department has water and wastewater infrastructure funds through the EPA that they spend every year. So they can be of great assistance on that side. The Department of Finance Administration administers the Community Development Block Grant Program that has resources available for economic development planning, and also for some infrastructure. There are some counties that go in every year and grab that money, and then there are others that don't. And so you should be thinking about how to get some money in there to your community for the Community Development Block Grant. The New Mexico Finance Authority has lots of incentive programs around lending. They also implement the New Market Tax Credit Program, which is still in existence. And those New Market Tax Credit areas very much mirror opportunity zones. So you can form tax credit deals around private projects in those areas that give tax relief, and in a similar way to opportunity zones. The State Department of Transportation every year puts out money for roads. For those of you looking at opportunity zones that have something to do with transportation and logistics, or the road to the airport, or the road for shipping that you need, such and such, why not get on the Department of Transportation's list for road improvements every year? And then I mentioned capital outlay. So those are some of the state agencies that I would be talking to if I was looking at opportunity zones. And then other leveraging opportunities. I'll just spend a little time on these folks. Community development financial institutions are basically nonprofit lenders that lend at a lower than market rate, lower than conventional lenders, and they do projects that typically conventional lenders won't touch for whatever reason. They might have unique construction loans or a type of capital program. So we have some CDFIs located here. A California company, a CDFI clearinghouse just opened office in New Mexico. They tend to do lending that's in $5 million and less range. We are working on a sawmill project in Cimarron, New Mexico that needs about a couple million in financing for a certain term construction loan and rehab loan, and we're having them talk to a CDFI because CDFIs tend to be flexible. And CDFIs also offer up technical assistance, and they will work with you on your plan. They will work with helping that private company understand the financial arrangement or other credit options. CDFIs are great partners. There are some local New Mexico CDFIs, but also national ones that have New Mexico in their area. If you look at the Opportunity Finance Network website, OFN, you can find a directory of all the CDFIs in the country. So my pitch on that is if your company that's locating in your opportunity zone gets rejected by conventional lenders, it might be worthwhile talking to a CDFI. Impact investors are folks that invest with a purpose, and they're all over the country. You got folks out of California and Arizona and New Mexico as well. Santa Fe Impact Investing Collaborative, run through the Santa Fe Community Foundation, has an application up today, I think. I think Juhi's here. Juhi Rand is here from Santa Fe Community Foundation, or was. She's out in the hall, but she could tell you more about it. They are looking for affordable housing projects. They are looking for agricultural projects, water projects, and their investors like to invest behind projects with a purpose, and they have a variety of arrangements. Their deadline's tomorrow, sorry. So if you could find Juhi, she could tell you all about it, but get your act together by tomorrow and get your application in. Foundations, national and local, have taken an interest in opportunity zones. Rockefeller Foundation in particular is very interested in rural opportunity zones and how we make sure the capital gets deployed beyond the urban areas. So foundations can provide a really essential extra lift on your project. Albuquerque Community Foundation has been making some impact investments around economic development type projects. We have the Kellogg Foundation here, who has also made an impact investment in the South Valley around a manufacturing plant for textiles. So you should have foundations in your wheelhouse. Maybe you have a local foundation. Maybe we can help you appeal to a national foundation. But foundations can very often plug in that last bit of funding you need. Or maybe provide the basis for other funders to come in on your stack. Conventional lenders obviously are all across New Mexico. They do a great job. We should also understand that they have the Community Reinvestment Act program that they try to deploy. Many of the large banks are very active in that. Bank of Albuquerque, Bank of the West, others in our state make special courtesies and exemptions and efforts to do projects that help with community and reinvestment. So if you have a local bank, if you know some of the banks here in Albuquerque, they may want to invest as part of the Community Reinvestment Act and give you slightly better terms on that private project or whatnot. And then my last but not least, one of my favorite is rural electric co-ops. And you may say, what the heck do rural electric co-ops have to do with any of this? Well, rural electric co-ops are primarily financed through the USDA, believe it or not. There are 13 of them in the state, and they have access to rural economic development loan and grants for their community. So a rural electric co-op can get a 0% interest loan for up to $2 million to make an investment in their area, and that loan comes from the USDA. They can come up to terms and payment terms and such through with that local entity, but who knew? Up to $2 million in investment available through your local rural electric co-op. They also have up to $500,000 in grant money available to create a loan fund for local businesses. And they set the terms of that loan fund. They can set it at 0.25% over 2 years, or they can do construction loans or acquisition or whatever. So there's lots of tremendous opportunity there through our rural electric co-ops. Okay, so finally, on my earlier points on things to do to get your zone going, the last item is marketing to investors, and Deborah Burns is going to cover this later. But I wanted to make a couple points on how to market to investors. You're going to hear a lot of this today. Investors have choices, as you all know, and they're looking for the best deal that they can find, a way to make money. Our New Mexico communities and opportunity zones have to learn to stand out from the crowd. We already have the advantage that everything we do in New Mexico tends to be unique and different, and we stand out, and people are excited to invest here. I mean, you know, you can go invest in a New York property deal, but wouldn't you rather invest in something exciting, new, and different in New Mexico? That would be great. So what is the unique vibe of your opportunity zone? How do you put your stamp on it that makes it a little bit different? Do you have a growing market? Do you have a senior population that's flocking to your area that you want to emphasize? Think about those unique attributes that you have and make that part of your sales pitch to investors. And like I said earlier, have a plan. Have a group together that's working together to make this appeal. You don't have to do 20 deals or 40 deals. If you do 2 deals, that's magnificent. Think about that. So you really, if you can all get together and work as a community to promote your opportunity zone, I think we can get some great, for lack of a better word, opportunities in the state. My contact information is here if you need any more advice. Our website is www.thegrantscollective.org, and we also have grownewmexico.com. We're ready, willing, and able to serve you and try to come up with some ideas and make some connections for you along the way. But I just want to emphasize, I want to see everybody get really active on this and make sure New Mexico doesn't miss the boat. So thank you. And there won't be any questions. Bill.
Terry, you skipped over one of the bottom lines, which was your congressional offices, and I just want to make a pitch that we can do searches of federal fund availability by department and agency, and then turn to you to actually help them write the grant application requiring this fund. So a lot of money, federal government, so we can work together.
Yeah, that's a match made in heaven. So we can, and that is something emphasized in the delegation. When this legislation got passed through opportunity zones, a couple of our 2 U.S. senators were really invested in this. They really want to see this happen. So also use them as folks to advocate for your zone with companies and with federal agencies. So if you've got that application pending over at one of our federal agencies, call up your U.S. senator and say, hey, can you put in a good word for us? So please use your congressional delegation. More questions? Ryan?
Terry, how big is your staff? How many people do you have?
We have about 5 people, and we have 2 people that are trainers that essentially help with that. And then we have a couple people on contract too that do specific things like financial analysis or might look at your capital stack and give you some input. So it's a little bit of 5 people on staff, and then we have several contractors that help out.
And have you been getting a lot of, from a state perspective, have you been receiving a lot of questions or inquiries from a specific portion of the state, whether it's rural or urban, or are you kind of seeing a lot of the same questions come from the same people?
I think I think we get a lot of questions out of Albuquerque, a lot of ideas and questions out of Albuquerque. We really try hard to go elsewhere and to help those rural communities figure this out and make sure they're not missing out on the information. And we have a couple of communities, you know, at USDA, we were really fond of kind of talking about some communities that are really aggressive in pursuing federal funds or an opportunity zone that might come along. So, you know, Santa Rosa is really good. Dixon, New Mexico is really good. Truth to Consequences is really on their game. So we also offer a lot of advice to these communities to say, hey, you know, go visit with your friends down the road and have them tell you how they do it, and that's good as well. So, but on opportunity zones, I have to say it's been too quiet. You know, we really need to see more activity on it. Yes?
You briefly touched on conventional lenders across the state, like the Bank of Albuquerque and Bank of the West, but can you name a few and elaborate a little more on private sector resources for economic growth?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think in the conventional lender sphere, you know, you have Like I said, your Wells Fargo's, which is national, obviously, Bank of the West, that's kind of regional. You know, you have your local, so Capital up in Santa Fe is local. So you have a wide variety, and you should be looking at the, in a sense, the group that you have in your community that might be interested in your zone. And then on the private investment side, obviously you have these funds. And I think Deborah will talk about this later, but you have funds that are basically bringing together lots of private investors that are looking at stuff. So you want to be in touch with funds too as well to understand who's interested and who's making these types of investments. Sure. Yes?
If I'm a business owner and I want to put up a manufacturing warehouse on my property, that's going to spur economic development, provide jobs, and all that stuff, how does an opportunity zone investor portfolio benefit me? And how do I get that written off to say, look, if I need this infrastructure, I'll build it, I'll provide the jobs, it's going to be on my property. Is it going to be mine at the end of the day?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's going to depend on the arrangements you strike. So I would recommend you save that question for Deborah at the next presentation, because she's the expert on how the funds will work and how investors partner up with the projects. My pitch would be on your side to be talking to like the economic development organizations in your area and expressing your interest, and then seeing what they might have available that goes to you to beef up your zone and make it attractive to investors. And you should be able to keep ownership. Question is, you know, with investors, how much ownership and such and such. But my pitch is around building up the infrastructure around it. And is there an opportunity to use a state, federal, or local fund to chip in on that? So, and I can share with you some ideas. Yes?
So Terry, you said that these zones were established by the Treasury Department, or was it?
Yes.
And are they static, or they get changed, or?
They're static. Yeah, they're not going to get changed unless Congress passes new legislation, basically. So what you got is what you got.
Okay, so like in Cibola County, you know, it's all on the eastern side of the county. Grants itself doesn't have, it doesn't
Yeah.
fall within it, and it never will.
Yeah, unfortunately. So this selection process happened last year, I think, led by the, or 2 years ago, led by the governor, and counties were given some input on it. But you know, it is what it is, I guess. Best way to put it. Joanna.
Can you elaborate on the funding sources that are available for plans for communities?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. So USDA does have a planning grant for rural communities, up to about $50,000 to do an economic development plan. You also have the Economic Development Administration does offer some planning resources, and I see Tricia Corbis is here from EDA. We were talking about you earlier and pitching your programs. So they have some planning resources available as well. Those are some federal government things. Federal Reserve and Department of Treasury do offer some economic development planning depending on what you're looking at. And depending, like, what they tend to do is get into partnership with you where they're providing some of their data and you're using some of it. So those are two other federal agencies that I would look at. And Deb, did you have something? Oh, thanks.
Yeah, I kind of just have, maybe it's more of a broader-based question. So we have, obviously, these various opportunities as it is designated in the state. And one of the things that I'm finding somewhat challenging is there's multiple landowners, obviously, that exist within each of these respective zones. And how to try to make sure that there are people that are thinking about the different types of projects that are eligible within them, to try and even put together, shall we say, a project offering specific to an opportunity zone. I'm not really seeing anybody coming out with project offerings for those zones, and I'm not sure how to initiate or get people really thinking about what they could be doing to bring in all those respective partners so that we don't miss out on the opportunity. There's a timeline in which those investments need to occur. I don't really know how to get that going, and I'm curious if you have any thoughts or suggestions.
Well, Well, I think Ryan will have something to contribute on this, but I would say as well, you know, the best take I have on it is to develop those stakeholder type meetings and find out what's out there, who has interest. You know, if you could somehow survey the land and property owners that are there to ask them, you know, what they're thinking about. Similar to this gentleman over here that is saying, I want to try to do this on my property. You know, you go try to survey what people think. I mean, Albuquerque is a different challenge because it's so big. For our rural communities, they probably have fewer property owners they're worrying about, but that's the best take I have. And Ryan, did you have 2 cents?
Absolutely. And this isn't on your agenda, but our next speaker, we're going to kind of sandwich somebody who's from the city of Santa Fe and try to talk about those. But what we have noticed, and at least from my perspective, when this first came out, is the education component. And it's an education component at all levels, so it's a very grassroots type of approach where businesses need to actually understand what the idea is here. We're starting to see a big push early on where states are putting 2 or 3 individuals who are overseeing the program. And now we're starting to see that kind of shift where cities and smaller municipalities are saying, we're going to put someone in charge of rounding out this information. And then holding little town hall type meetings, whether it's the first 30 minutes of educating them. Here's just what happened. And then that second part is we're kind of identifying who it's going to affect. And then the hard part, which the state is struggling with, is connecting them to those technical experts, a lawyer, a CPA. We can't recommend those people, but making sure that businesses know you need to be speaking to a licensed professional about the complexities of this. You need to talk to a fund manager and do your own due diligence from a business perspective as well as a community perspective, so you don't become a farm. And then the last one is counties. I've had phone calls where they're saying, someone said if I give them $25,000, there'll be an opportunity zone. It's like, no. It's making sure that the counties understand that here is the actual, here's the rules, these aren't going to change the rules bill, but the tracts of land aren't going to change even with the upcoming census, and they redrawing the district and census lines, those will change. So just that little detail and offering that education component out there at the track level tends to be most effective.
There's a quick piggyback. We both made the point, Terry, on that project pipeline aspect, that the work that's already going on at the regional or the council of government or the metropolitan planning organizational level, that they have not only technical but they're already doing some of the economic development, strategic development there, and adding in an opportunity zone overlay, along with Terry's suggestion on the community engagement process, which is already built in to that COG level, is a natural evolution of this in terms of regularizing some type of strategic framework.
Yeah, and like you're saying, some of the work's already been done. So we do have Ann Simon here from the Middle Rio Grande COG, and Scott Beckman from the Northern COG out of Santa Fe that can talk to you about that. And they do analysis all the time on looking at the different sectors that they're trying to invest in. But I also would think in Albuquerque, if you know the sectors you're interested in, you know which properties you're looking at, you're going to have to somehow narrow it down to a workable group as quickly as can be done. And I think Deborah alluded to this, is time is of the essence here. You can't work on this opportunity zone to have this investment happen in 5 years. This has to happen in the next, 6 to 8 months. And so you really need to get on the horse on this. And because a lot of work needs to be done in a short amount of time. So you probably want to triage what your opportunities are and get to those that look to be the best and pursue that. Yes?
Knowing that there is a deadline on the horizon and it's approaching quickly, are there any discussions at the federal level at extending those dates?
Yes, so one thing to look at is Department of Treasury is coming out with regulations periodically describing or adding context to various parts of this program. So you want to stay in touch with economic development on the latest guidance, because I think one of the issues you have here is there's urban opportunity zones in Detroit and New York and Los Angeles, that those communities are just ready to go with property development, and they are on this. But what they don't want to have happen at the federal level, and this is what Rockefeller and the other groups that are working on this don't want to have happen, is for all that money just to be plunged into Chicago, LA, and New York. They want to see it get elsewhere. So if Treasury can help with that, I think they will, because so they're going to be watching these investment opportunities and see where they're tracking and then make adjustments. They still have to stay within the parameters of what Congress passed and the President signed, but they will try to work within those rules, probably for some flexibility. Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Terry. And those were some great questions.
Can I
Sure.
just have one quick question? Will these slides be made available to registrants?
Yes, yeah, to repeat the questions, someone asked if the presentations will be available after the forum, and they will. We're going to send out the presentation, and then they'll be available online for everyone too. So we're going really quickly. We are ahead of schedule. So we wanted to bring up one of our really close partners, and that is Rich Brown from the city of Santa Fe. This is impromptu, so I thank Rich for obliging us. But Rich and the city of Santa Fe are doing some really exciting work. They're kind of on the front lines of some of the activity that we're seeing in New Mexico. And this forum is meant to be used as a learning experience and also a sharing experience. So if he would be so kind to share some experiences that the city has faced while they've been working with the Opportunity Zone program, that would be great. So I'd like to welcome Rich Brown, who's an economic development specialist.
Good morning, everyone. I'm not prepared anything. I didn't bring a jacket, but thank you, Ryan and Johanna. I'm going to speak to the city of Santa Fe. I work in the Office of Economic Development, and I've been working in the Opportunity Zone since about February, and I started last January. So I've been at this since I started with the Office of Economic Development. So when I was listening to Terry's presentation, I realized I was getting goosebumps because the whole process and the strategy around creating a performance zone within your city was written up on these slides. And so when Ryan asked me to speak, this slide speaks to what the city of Santa Fe has done to make the signal of Santa Fe an opportunity place for opportunity funding. So I'm going to go through each step and tell you about our story, how we did it, what our successes are, what things we're working on. So starting in February, as I said, the governor and the U.S. Treasury, after the 2017 Tax Act, designated these zones in the states. 67% of them were to be designated. We had 7, and one of the things we did is we named each zone so that we had a sort of a marketing aspect to it. And out of the 7, we were able to get 5. So when you look on a map of New Mexico, we're just a speck on the state, but we have 5 zones that were actually ultimately designated by the U.S. Treasury and signed off by the previous governor. What we did then from there is that I convened all of our internal stakeholders, public works, land use, finance, asset development, MPO, etc. And I was trying to figure out if we had assets that we could leverage or if we had money that we could leverage. We didn't have any of it, except for one zone. We have this Midtown campus that was a college that went out of business and went bankrupt. So we have a 64-acre tract, a parcel in one of our opportunity zones, which we have as our prize beauty contest winner that we're using to showcase what we can do to develop in an opportunity zone. So once we had the names and once we talked to our internal stakeholders, I started on an educational program. And what I did was someone talked about asset mapping. What I did was I figured out who was internal stakeholders, who are external stakeholders, and then segmented those out. So on the external side, I looked for our impact investors, I looked for our commercial realtors, and I looked for anyone who was a high net worth individual or a wealth manager who had connections with a high net worth individual who would want to talk about how this worked and how they could get involved. From there, and we'll skip this to delete because I was the lead, once I knew who those folks were, I then took the map and created a website. And on that map, I helped put together what I call performance parcels. Places within the zones that I named that would be great stories to tell that would sort of provide some interest in our zones. So as I went out and educated the external stakeholders, I did it about every 2 weeks. talked to commercial realtors, talked to funders, talked to individual funders, met with Deb Burns and her Invest US fund, talking about lots of things. What our zones were, what sort of overlays we had, what sort of incentives we had. Because remember, we had no money and we didn't really have that much land to leverage. And then from there, we then went into kind of the financial literacy aspect. Because a lot of people have questions about how the funds and how the zones work. So once I educated them on how the program was about and what was going on in our city, then I try to connect funds with the stakeholders, mostly commercial realtors and developers, to say, if you have a shovel-ready project, send it to me. I'd like to put it on our website. I can put it on the Mexico EDD site so that something's out there. There's a signal there that says, in the city of Santa Fe, there's a parcel within a zone that wants to be a housing mixed-use area. We have an issue with housing, so we focused on housing mostly. But we looked at all the C2s in our zones to say, if you're a commercial realtor, let's get that information out there for funders or developers. From there, I then talked to our impact investors, and Juhi was here, I think she's outside. One of the things that the impact investors wanted to do was to figure out how to address the community equity aspect of these zones. Because what we didn't want to do, especially in a city like Santa Fe, is to gentrify these neighborhoods. And so we had a conversation with them about creating a community land trust, or figuring out how we could beautify the neighborhood if we knew something larger was coming in. So we talked to that stakeholder to figure out what sort of strategies we could do around looking at the zones, ones especially that had low-income housing that needed upkeep or update, roofing, fencing, roads, stormwater, etc. So we're in the process of working with the Community Foundation and others on how to connect impact investing in with the performance of the zones. From there, we have a website. It's the City of Santa Fe, it's Economic Development, Opportunity Zones, and on this website, what I did was I had a connection and resource aspect to it. So what you'll find is we use GIS and Esri. So we build a map, shows our little zones, and you can click on the zone, it's color-coded, and there is an organization in Washington called Opportunity 360. And Opportunity 360 created 90-page demographic deep dive data maps for each census tract across the country. So we added those as PDFs and links so that if anyone was looking for the zone and wanted to figure out, how do I do diligence on this neighborhood? How do I figure out how to develop this neighborhood? You can click on that and understand each one of our census tracts, income levels, wealth levels, commuters, housing, trends of housing, etc. So each of our tracts actually has some deep dive data that we started with. We have actually progressed from there. We now connect to the state's economic development site, and we also engaged with a tech company called My Sidewalk. And My Sidewalk is a data visualization tool, and we're actually now building dashboards that tell the story of Santa Fe. You can click on the dashboard and understand what's available versus including what do we have in the zones, who are the resources there, what are the resources there, what kind of funds are available, and what sort of commercial realtors who have shovel-ready projects that would like to talk to you about it. One of the things we're moving toward right now that I've done the education part, financial literacy part, is the SBA, Region 6 SBA, reached out to me and said, we'd like to come to your city because we see you're doing all this work. We'd like to talk about one of the initiatives that the White House has come across. There's 17 agencies that they have a mandate to either spend grant money or to help with technical assistance for cities around the country for opportunity zones, and SBA would like to talk to our small businesses in each one of the census tracts to figure out if there's ways to create some funding for growth. And so we're working on a convening starting in October to meet with these small businesses so that we can have a connection between now we reach the commercial realtors, now we know who the funders are, and now we have potential grant and microloan money that can help small businesses there sort of grow in their own way. So that's kind of our story, and one of the things I forgot to mention is that every time a U.S. Treasury release happens, I then reconvene the group again because there's a lot of questions that people ask, and so we've had 2 so far, and we're hoping that the last one is going to happen in November, but we all know that the clock is running out, so we're hoping that we get more funding that the Treasury is sort of finalize it, and you'll see some of the work. So if you come to my desk, I have some examples of our work, and if you're a city or county economic development person, I actually have a little memory stick, which is a toolkit that you can take with you to help you sort of kickstart your opportunities up. So thanks a lot, Ryan, and that's it.
So I can't highlight that enough. That was kind of an impromptu, but you can see that the gentleman knows what he's talking about. I've met with large cities, small rural areas, and I think Santa Fe is a very good resource. It covers a more condensed area, urban mix, but it also has parcels that are out in the county that he's partnering with multiple people to kind of really do a deep dive. So I can't recommend you enough as municipal members or people from a rural or even an urban area to go just spend a little time and get a little deep dive and maybe a deeper education. The next person I am going to introduce, we hit the road when this first was passed for, I want to say, a month and a half, I believe, and